Israel continues to uncover people who were killed, who were slaughtered, and I use that term very advisedly, slaughtered on October 7th. Israel has not only the right, as we've said, but the obligation to defend itself. We're not in the business of second-guessing what they're doing. We are talking to them on a regular basis about how they do it.
Joining us now, Democratic Governor of New York, Kathy Hochul. She's just returned from Israel, where she was the first elected U.S. official to visit a border town massacred by Hamas. She also met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Governor, thank you for being with us. I want to first talk briefly about your father, who you lost. I had read his final words to you. The final words that Jack Courtney gave to you, which was that it says here in the Buffalo paper, they were characteristically blunt. I'm proud of you, Dolly, but keep your GD head down. Tell us about your dad.
Oh, he was tough, but he started with nothing. He worked in the steel plants with his father, hot, dirty work. He lived in a trailer park with my mom when they first were married, had a lot of kids, but when he got a college degree, he worked hard. He literally lived the American dream and rose up to not just become a social activist in many, many causes, also headed up a company that he grew to over 3,000 and took it global and national. So that's the story that so many people come to our country for, and my family lived it. So he was always giving me advice, always concerned about me. And yes, he said, I'll say it on television, he said, Dolly, I'm so proud of you, but keep your goddamn head down. And that's just how he spoke. He was worried about me, but I had to tell him I was going into harm's way. Literally my last words from the JFK airport. So I miss him dearly. I really do.
Yeah, he. But you continued on that trip, and you stayed on that trip instead of coming back home. I would guess. You did that because that's what he would have wanted you to do.
And I needed to comfort a nation. There were so many people that I knew were suffering. New York is home to more Jews. New York City has more Jews than Tel Aviv and Jerusalem combined. I mean, 2.2 million. So everybody knew somebody. Everybody had experienced in real pain. And I needed to go there and just let people know that we stand with Israel. We condemn the terrorist act of Hamas. And I needed to see and bear witness and tell the stories upon my return to strengthen our resolve to eradicate evil and places in Gaza and free the Palestinians from the stranglehold of Hamas. I'm concerned about innocent Palestinians. Of course we are. But what Hamas did on October 7th will go down in the annals of history as one of the worst terrorist attacks in terms of the scale of the population. I met the refugees from one community. I went to that place 1 mile from the border, Joe, and a population of 700. This is a kibbutz. These are basically, if they were in the U.S., they'd probably be, some of them would be hippies. I mean, these are peace-loving people, peace activists. They lost 70 of their own residents, 10% of the population slaughtered that day, and many were taken hostage. I needed to see that, talk to the leaders about our own hostages, but also just to give comfort to people who in turn were trying to give me comfort. It was something I'll never forget.
Governor, good to see you this morning. You started to mention about your trip to Israel and the kibbutz. Tell us a little more, if you will, about what you saw. I know there must have been some difficult images as well as some truly harrowing and horrible stories.
Our videographer was kept out of some of the rooms that I went into, so the true horror is not revealed, but they really was a house of horror when I walked in, and stepping over not just everything, broken glass, broken windows, the mattresses up against the wall covered in blood. They showed me where a young couple was found on top of their children, all of them murdered, assassinated. Went into a safe room, and the Israeli government provided all these little homes with a safe room to protect them. And what they had found in there were naked bodies of two young women who had been butchered. It was hard. I saw where someone had been a hostage and they shot him, and what you saw on the wall was pretty horrific. And I needed to see that directly. I'm not afraid to walk into a room like that and smell the smell of death, and to experience that and be the person who can come back and reveal what these people, these innocent people, peace-loving people, were having to experience. It was an atrocity, just like the Holocaust, can never be forgotten. And I needed to talk about what I saw to others, and I will continue to do that. And also to fight for American hostages, all hostages. And I raised their names, and I left the picture of Omer Nutra, whose parents I had met in New York before I left. I was with his aunt and uncle in Jerusalem. I left their photo, the photo with the president of Israel. I said, we need to get all of the hostages home, but I'm here because there are so many that have a New York connection. They're either New Yorkers themselves or have a family member that's just distraught without having the knowledge of whether they're even dead or alive.
Governor Hochul, could you talk about some of the hostages, the American hostages who have New York connections?
Well, one was a young man who, Omer Nutra, he grew up on Long Island. His parents live on Long Island. And Many went over to Israel. He took a gap year. He was going to become a student at SUNY Binghamton. He wanted to go over to Israel for a year. He's missing. There are others. There was one man who was 64. He said his brother and his wife had been kidnapped from the kibbutz. He says these were peace-loving people. They were trying to establish relationships with the people of Gaza. They lived there because they wanted to, find some way to bring peace to the world. He says we've not heard from them at all. We don't know where they are. And another father told me about Italy, his young son, who just they don't know what happened to him. They have no idea where he is. So some people had grown up in Rochester, New York, some Long Island. There are a lot of connections, a lot of relatives, and they're in the dark. They have no idea whether these family members are dead or alive, and they're not going home until they know. And I had to go there and say, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. President, we stand with Israel. What you did was important to fight back against terrorism, because we do not want Hamas and Hezbollah now to feel emboldened. And we are certainly a city, New York City has a lot of experience with terrorist attacks, but bring these hostages home and get the humanitarian aid flowing into Gaza, because there are a lot of innocent people being affected as well.
All right, New York Governor Kathy Hochul, we greatly appreciate you being with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.